Good morning, everybody. If you had been in Buffalo, New York on this date, September 6 in 1901, you probably visited the Pan American Exhibition. President McKinley did, as did his assassin. And it was on this date that McKinley was assassinated. This election map of 1896 reminds us that President McKinley was elected pretty easily in his race with William Jennings Bryan. And soon after his election, we were victorious in the Spanish-American War. So we were now an international power. McKinley himself had been a Civil War veteran, so he knew about war. And at the same time, we have American corporations becoming very wealthy, like Standard Oil. One year, it had profits of 85%. So we are a world power. We're an economic colossus. And we're advancing with technology. McKinley, pictured on the left, was the first president to ride in an automobile, a Stanley steamer. So when the election of 1900 came, he looked like he was going to win, and his vice president was Teddy Roosevelt. And Republican handlers thought Roosevelt was sort of a troublemaker, so they thought, well, if we make him vice president, he'll disappear from the scene, so we'll sort of get him out of the way. And when the election of 1900 was finished, McKinley had won again with Roosevelt as his vice president. So he looked to have a prosperous second term. And in 1901, he visited the Pan American Exhibition in Buffalo, New York. McKinley was a big believer in international trade, and this was a perfect place for him to go, like a World's Fair. So this is Leon Czolgosz. He's the fellow who shot McKinley. He grew up in Detroit, moved around the Midwest a bit, worked in Cleveland, was laid off, saw economic turmoil, particularly with depressions and things, and was attracted to anarchism. And anarchism in the late 1800s had a goal of killing world leaders. A number of political leaders in Europe had been killed, so killing the president of our country made sense if you were an anarchist. And the famous American anarchist was Emma Goldman. And Czolgosz heard her speak and was inspired by her, although she was not at all linked to the assassination. So one day in Buffalo, he went to a local hardware store and bought a .32 caliber pistol like this one, and felt he needed to shoot McKinley, but he didn't know quite how to do it. And McKinley, pictured here in a carriage in New York City, loved to be out in the public. And he loved to see himself as a friend of the common man, so to speak. So here's a picture at the Pan American Exhibition in Buffalo of the crowd waiting to see the president. And McKinley encouraged this, and it drove his security detail crazy. So here's a photo of McKinley giving his final speech at the exhibition in Buffalo. And from here, he walked to another World's Fair building. And it's here where he was shot. So if you look carefully, you can see an X on the stage. And that's where McKinley stood as he was greeting people. And at one point, Czolgosz came up to him with his pistol, a handkerchief wrapped around it, came up to McKinley, shot him. McKinley did not die right away. He died about a week later of infection. And here's his funeral in Canton, Ohio, where he was from. Now, Czolgosz was arrested right away and was tried and eventually was sent to the electric chair. And here's a drawing of that. And Americans became really nervous about anarchists in general. Now, the place where McKinley was shot is here. The building was taken down after the exhibition, but there's a plaque there on that rock. And if you go to Canton, Ohio sometime, you can visit McKinley's grave. And you can go to the Football Hall of Fame while you're there, too. But it was soon after this that the Secret Service was officially charged with protecting the president. That happened a few years after. A result of that assassination in Buffalo.